should not come to a surprise to you or anyone else. It was long overdue. Straight up the inside like the veteran that he is. 94 has been on rails all day.
Listen up, you betcha he is. One last time through the one. Hampshire win. Kickstart Kenny wins.
Great job, Kenny. He gets the job done. I love it.
Yeah, welcome back. It's another episode of SMX Insider. We are the Jasons, Weigandt and Thomas. Very happy. We're the fans at our race at Glendale. That is Arizona, outside of Phoenix, Monster Energy AMA Supercross, SuperMotocross World Championship. Because when Ken Roczen wins, it pretty much makes everyone's evening. He's at a totally different stage of his career now as far as his popularity. So these are always feel-good wins.
Yeah, I think everybody, even if you're not a Ken Roczen fan, maybe you have a different favorite rider, it's hard not to feel good for him. It's difficult to top Indianapolis last year. We all know that. But, you know, at this stage of his career, the things he's gone through and just purely watching what these wins mean to him now, I think that puts a smile on everybody's face.
We'll dive a lot deeper into Roczen's career and stats and numbers right now with Clinton Fowler later on in the show. But a topic I know you want to hit on here is Eli Tomac. We really had him under the microscope after a terrible round last week in Detroit, where he went from starting third to a lap down and barely getting top 10. It was better at Glendale for sure because he finished fourth, but it is still not the Eli Tomac, the legendary Eli Tomac type performance. We'll break down him battling Jett Lawrence for a podium later. But overall, there's been a lot of declarative statements, even by our buddy Steve Mathis, saying 6 rounds is enough to know he's not going to win this title. A lot of other people saying he's not the rider he used to be. You're pushing back against that, JT.
Yeah, I just think it's too early. I kind of theorized that it would take him time to get back to the level that he wants to be at. You know, I thought the second half of the season was when it would really show up. You let him get literally get his legs underneath him again, find that pace. We all know how great he is at Daytona. And then historically, January's always been a tough month for him anyway. In 2022 and 2023, it may have been the outlier for that. But I just think with 17 points down, we've seen flashes of brilliance, and that's an important part of this. It's not like it doesn't exist. That race 3 at Anaheim 2 should be an indicator that he still has it. So I'm not saying he's going to end up being champion. I just think those writing him off after a difficult January are doing so at their own peril.
Yeah, 7th in points doesn't sound good, but this is by far the closest the top 7 have ever been after 6 rounds in the history of this series. 17 points really isn't a lot to make up with 10 plus rounds to go. So we're going to get into that and a lot of other things. So much to talk about in this episode, including, of course, our 250 class, a much-needed win for the Rockstar Energy Husqvarna rider, RJ Hampshire. Pro Circuit now back on top in both 250 divisions. A lot of other really neat things coming your way, including Fowler's Facts and our big interview, because it's always fun to talk to people who are getting into this whole thing we call Supercross. Oh, this is really cool edition of our big interview. I love when we get athletes from other sports and get to get their temperature on what Supercross is like. We're joined by pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers, MLB, Dustin May. So you were at the race. You got to see Supercross firsthand. What are your impressions of that?
It was a lot of fun. It was definitely a lot of energy, and I loved the loud noises of the engines, and it was definitely a blast to be able to take a group of guys and enjoy the moment together.
Obviously, you're new to it, right? So you don't have any favorite riders going in. Who kind of caught your eye, right? We're so involved in this. We know these guys personally, but I'm always curious as a new person with new eyeballs seeing the sport, like which rider kind of jumped off the page? She was like, I kind of identify with that guy.
I guess the guys that won. I like guys that win. So there was, I can't remember his name, but he had like longer blonde hair. He won like the first race out of the gate. And he just beat everybody. Like it wasn't even close. Like he was almost like a full lap ahead of everybody. And I was like, I like that guy. That's my type of guy. He just keeps on the throttle. It doesn't matter how bad he's beating you.
Also, you're bouncing back from injury. In motorcycle racing, that's certainly common as well. So you're fighting your way back. So what's it like to have your whole life dedicated to something and then it's kind of taken away a little bit and you can't rush back? That's another thing these racers have to work through. So what's that like for you to be on the sidelines right now but trying to contribute still?
Being hurt, I mean, I guess you could say that I'm used to it because I've been in it for so long. This is my second, I guess you could say, Tommy John, because it's super long rehab. I mean, the first one that I went through right at like 16 months before I was back, like competing at the right level. And then this one's going to be anywhere from hopefully 12, but potentially like 13, 14 months before I get back to like fully competing, like back where I need to be. Like your strength and everything's going to come back, but like making sure like your mental focus and like staying on it like day to day, because your rehab gets so monotonous. Like you're pretty much doing the exact same thing every day. So like making sure that you're staying on top of the things that you need to do is definitely the biggest thing.
As I understand it, you got some to walk around the pits, check things out, see the activation stuff. Can you give us your overall impression of kind of what you saw with the rider side? And then opening ceremonies is a huge hit for a lot of fans. Just overall impressions of all of that as well.
It was super cool. Walking outside where all the trucks are, where they have all the equipment and all the bikes and everything are set up. I mean, just walking around. I don't really know a whole lot about like engines and everything, but like I'm super enthused with like the loud engines and the loud noises and jumps and all that stuff. So being able to walk out there and be in that environment and watch the BMX jumps and stuff out there, that was really exciting. Having the fireworks, that's probably like a normal Saturday night for y'all, but that's different for us. We don't get fireworks very often. I mean, we have maybe 2 or 3 firework nights a year, so it's like it's not very often that we get to see the fireworks. But the intro rides, those were cool, because we kind of have like intros like that when our hitters go up to hit, like they all have their like walk-up songs and they like get in the moment and they do their prep routines and they're like getting ready and doing their swings and everything like that. And then us pitchers, we have our walkouts too. We don't really get as swaggy with it like the hitters do, because we got to just throw a baseball forward. So it's a little different vibe on that end, but we still get to listen to the music and then internally get hyped. So yeah, I definitely liked watching them and all of them like trying pumping up the crowd and all that stuff. That was cool.
You got to get some walkout music like Ricky Vaughn. Come out there and get people fired up.
Yeah.
Love it. Hey, thanks for cutting out a little bit of time for us, but good luck on the mound when you do get back out there.
Yeah, thank you for sure.
All right, it's 30-second board time. Hot topics in the sport. We're actually going to start with the KTM Junior Supercross Challenge. Really cool story here. A kid from Italy competed at Glendale, Arizona. I'm 50% Italian, so I'll give a shot. It's Leonardo Garani on the number 7. And that was cool to see. We also had a rider from Alaska and a rider from Hawaii. And the winner was Levi Meyer, who had some bad luck. He was probably going to win the electric class title at Loretta Lynn's last summer. And then the bike didn't start in the final moto, but he avenged it by winning at Glendale, Arizona. He also raised about $500 through Ryan Dungey's foundation as well for St. Jude. So all around, some really cool stories, as always, coming out of the KJSC.
The draw for these events to get out in front of that crowd and have that experience reaches far and wide. You think about Eli Tomac being a part of this program years ago. So we may be looking at a future Monster Energy Supercross champion. Each and every week, these KTMs are out there.
Yeah, the photo kept going around of Eli racing the Phoenix race back, I think, in 2001. And now he is a legend of the sport. And then a legend of another sport. This is really cool when we get a little crossover between other disciplines. So PGA stopped by. They had the Waste Management Open, which is considered probably the most fan-friendly wild golf event. And Ricky Fowler, a former motocross racer and huge fan of the sport, actually wore a jersey that looked just like Ryder DiFrancesco and Justin Barcia's stuff for a Supercross race.
Yeah, I love these crossover events like this. And unfortunately, Ricky didn't make the cut. I was hoping he would make it over to the race on Saturday night. But yeah, his roots are firmly in the motocross and supercross world. And for him to represent and then the crossover with Justin Barcia doing that at our Glendale Monster Energy Supercross event, I love it, right? There's really no downside to it. It attracts new fans. And I'm sure there were people watching the Waste Management Tour going, what is that about? I need to learn more about that. What is he wearing? Which is just going to bring more eyeballs.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, TLD had the crossover with the new Ghostbusters movie. So the culture of cool that motocross and supercross has definitely bleeds over into other disciplines. And when we say motocross, the culture of cool, it's right here at the center of it. We're only 100 days away. I can't believe this. From the Pro Motocross opener in Southern California. We're talking so much about Monster Energy Supercross right now, but we've got motocross and SMX playoff points to think about as well.
Yeah, it's amazing that we're already talking about that again. But yeah, Pro Motocross is, for most of the people probably watching this is the life they live, riding motocross throughout the week and on the weekends. what a great championship it is. And I'm sure that going into this off weekend coming up, a lot of riders, especially the 250 West region, will be thinking about this very championship as we move forward.
Let's bring back Hot and Not. We haven't had that in 30-second board in a while, but there's so many stories to cover right now. And the first one I want to cover is fans. We had a much bigger crowd in Detroit than we had before, and the crowd was awesome again. I think over 50,000 at both Detroit and at Glendale. So we like to talk here from the broadcast side because we're both part of the show, but the live audiences are having a great time as well.
Yeah, the turnout's been phenomenal. There's so many ways to watch Supercross. I don't know that anything can top being there in person. But yes, every weekend I look around during opening ceremonies and I'm absolutely blown away, not only with the size of the attendance, but the enthusiasm and how involved they are. And every time there's a pass, their favorite rider moves around, you can hear Aaron Plessinger alone is enough to get these people out of their seats. So yeah, it's a great time to be a Supercross fan.
Might be a great time, finally again, to be a member of the Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki team, because look at this. It's like retro time. They now are in sole possession of the red plate in both 250 West with Levi Kitchen and 250 East with Austin Forkner. This is well overdue for this team.
Weeds their back. There's no other way to put it. And it's hard to imagine that they would be having this much success without the starts really coming around. And I think that's the story within a story. They've figured out something with the motorcycle and their starts. And you look at Austin Forkner, his rebound to Detroit. You look at Levi Kitchen. He's been so consistent with the starts, which has allowed him to parlay that into good results. So you know there's been a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and it's finally showing up in the results column now.
Yeah, that team has always taken pride in building horsepower. So when they see those starts, you know Mitch Payton, the team owner, is very, very happy. Let's see if they can finally get another #1 plate to hang on the door for that squad. In the 450 class, I feel like every week we have to talk about the same thing. We just keep adding new winners. We're up to 5 now in just 6 rounds.
Yeah, and I don't know where this number stops at because Eli Tomac hasn't gotten a win yet. And does one of the rookies, does Malcolm Stewart finally get his? Like, there are still riders that have to make that jump. And we're already at 5. Like, we're already near the average for a season, and we're only 6 races in. So if parity is your thing, you're having a heck of a 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget Jason Anderson, who was on Roczen's wheel the whole time. Flip a coin in a couple different directions at races this year, and Anderson ends up a winner. And I think what's also exciting for this is these are familiar names. We mentioned at the top of the show how popular it is to see Roczen win. In the 250 class, you've got, for the 250 division standards, old war horses, Jordan Smith and RJ Hampshire trading blows, and that was a big bounce back for Hampshire to get back on the board and become a 2-time winner this year.
Yeah, he really needed that. And it wasn't a very typical race for RJ. He kind of waited them out, and he's usually one pushing the envelope there. So mistakes got him there. You know, Jordan Smith made a key mistake, actually 2 key mistakes there. So for RJ, it was good to see him show some poise and get back in this fight. And we have a true 3-way fight for that 250 West region.
Yeah, and then as we mentioned, Roczen just the class of the field by far in the 450 class. And we'll get deeper into that with Fowler's facts later on in the show. By the way, I just want to say with Hampshire, I feel like Hampshire played that race perfectly, but you said watching very closely, there are still Hampshire moments out there.
Oh, he's still RJ, no question about it. But I think that's the key for him to go the pace he needs to go. And if you ask him, he's like, yeah, okay, I can back it down, but I'm not going to go fast enough to win races. So it's almost pick your poison, and you almost just have to take the good with the bad if he's going to be in that title fight. And it's a scary watch. You know, if there was an RJ cam each week, I think you might have to sign a waiver to be a part of that experience. But in the end, if he can rack up the wins and avoid some of the mistakes, or at least minimize them, that's the big thing, minimize them, maybe he can find a way to grab that red plate again.
Really exciting how that 250 season has transpired at the top. And then this developing story as well, we were hyped to see the 40-year-old, now almost 41-year-old Billy Laninovich trying Supercross again, and then he got into a main event, and now he's done it again. He did it through the LCQ, rode really well at Glendale.
Yeah, what a story. You know, we kind of broke this at San Francisco, talking about the win 20 years prior, and I think everybody's been watching and waiting ever since then to see if he could do this. And to be racing at 40 in the 250 class, with what are, let's just face it, a lot of kids out there. He's racing against teenagers, and I'm sure it has to be a harrowing experience at times, but he's getting it done. Dead last gate pick in the LCQ, gets into the main event, and I don't know what else you're looking for if you're looking for something or a guy to cheer for in this 250 West region. He's just out there for fun. He's not getting rich doing this. This is purely for fun and to live out a dream of making a comeback.
If you see the hair coming out of the back of the helmet, though, you'd think he's one of the young kids out there. So maybe that's how he fits in. Okay, so our next hot topic, it involves Jett Lawrence. Anything involving Jett Lawrence is a hot topic, especially the things he says off of the racetrack. The riding really hasn't been a problem this year. He's back to sole possession of the points lead. We've been anticipating this big Jett Lawrence, Eli Tomac battle. Kind of got it for the podium, but he was tracking Eli down the entire time. And when he got there, Eli didn't put up much defense. So that wasn't much of a battle. But what is getting more attention again is what Jett said after the race, and this comes from the post-race press conference.
It was cool. It was cool to kind of follow him because, obviously nowadays it's not like the exact same as the beast as he used to be, but it's still Eli Tomac. So it's kind of cool to follow him.
So here's what I believe Jett was trying to do there, JT. He doesn't want to say this was a declarative, I am now better than Eli Tomac. I think he was trying to be humble and say, but I know this is not the Eli Tomac. This is not the Hall of Fame level beast mode Eli Tomac, who I passed for third. But JT, do you think anyone actually took it in that respectful of a way?
No, and unfortunately, Jett doesn't have any room for error in this department. There have been so many questionable comments over the last 6 or 8 months that everybody's ready to pounce on every word, and they're gonna take that and say that Jett's riding Eli off as over the hill. I don't think that's what he meant. I think he knows he's coming off an injury. He's working his way back to that excellence that we know that Eli can show us. But yeah, that's the unfortunate part of being in the spotlight is everybody's going to take what you say and twist it into their own narrative. And Jett's living that experience right now.
Yeah, he's not backing away from it. He just keeps doing this stuff all the time. It's entertaining for us to watch, no doubt about it. Like it or not, it definitely has people talking. And then there's less talking with others. There wasn't much to say as we go to the not category about our defending champion, Chase Sexton. We heard he had a crash during the week, and it could have been real bad, as in he might not have even raced Glendale. He did race, but in the end, really started dropping back late and barely scratched out a top 10.
Yeah, it's I don't think there's ever a good time for an injury. Thankfully, he only had to race one race before he gets this much-needed weekend off. But it was a true salvage job. You could tell he didn't have the fire or intensity, and that's purely because he didn't have the grip strength, in my opinion. He's just trying to get through this, not lose the championship in Glendale, and then try to come back in Arlington and be his best self again. And we'll have to see. We'll see what the time frame is for that. But I do think it was a very good sign that he could still put in a top 10, kind of hang around with some of the elite riders in Glendale with, 13 days to rest going into Arlington. I think we'll see a much different Chase Sexton going in there.
Well, it can always be worse. Like this. Nate Thrasher, oh my, this is physics and gravity working in complete opposite of what a dirt bike racer wants. Oh.
Yeah. For Nate Thrasher, we've seen this type of crash far too many times, and it was a really difficult jump there. I went out in the race and tried to show how challenging it was, and he came up way short, right? Clipping it a little bit is dicey. He was far too short, and I'm sure he's relived that crash about 10 times over the last couple of days, but yeah, that is a far too common scene is to see Nate Thrasher riding off in a mule. Remember, at Anaheim 1, he had a crash, went over the bars, and did this same thing. Had to be carted off in the Alpine Stars Medic mule. So tough break for Thrasher because it's really been feast or famine for him this year.
Yeah, he went on social media on Sunday to say he had a concussion and a bone bruise. Expects to be back for the next West race, which isn't until late March in Seattle. So not season ending. But man, that was a scary one to watch. And honestly, it wasn't great for any of the Yamahas. We mentioned Jordan Smith had 2 incidents in the main event. That cost him the points lead. We mentioned Tomac getting bumped off the podium by Jett. But honestly, I think the worst news of all to me was Cooper Webb, who had all this momentum. He could have been the best rider of the previous race at Detroit. Not the same this time for Webb, who was just getting shuffled back. I think he finished 7th, but this is not the Cooper Webb we've seen throughout the year. Tomac, we think, could get better. What about Webb and that performance in the desert?
Yeah, I'm just going to chalk it up to Glendale. His historical average finish is 7th. He finishes 7th on the night. He's never gotten a podium in Glendale. Even his championship years, his best finish was a 4th. So something about this track, I think it really comes down to the way the dirt is. And also you have to remember the whoops for Glendale are often very, very difficult. They weren't that difficult this particular weekend, but historically, I think that's what's caused him to have difficult results there in the past. So I'm not going to try to take too much from this one round. We've seen excellence from him in 2024, and I think we're going to get back to that when we go to Arlington.
Yeah, when I think of the skill set of Webb, when the track slows down and gets rough, that's where he excels. That track was fast from the beginning of the night to the end, and that hard dirt I don't think breaks down as much. And then his ability to switch lines doesn't really come into play. So got to hope after the break he comes back. He did win the Arlington Triple Crown race last year, and Arlington is the next race on our calendar. Could always be worse. What the heck is going on with Justin Barcia? This is trending worse each weekend, and we thought with each week he would start to get better.
Yeah, it's been interesting because last year he was one of the only riders who was really happy with that gas KTM. You know, it's a very similar chassis to each other, but he was the one singing the praises of it in 2023. You know, fast forward to 2024, and he seems like he's really struggling with that chassis. So these things are really fickle. They can change really quickly, but you kind of read between the lines in his social media comments, talk to him, you know, off camera. And that's what seems to be the problem, is he is just not gelling with that gas at the moment. And yeah, we're 6 races in. He's got to figure this thing out quickly.
He was so happy with the bike last year. That's a red flag. It never lasts. It never lasts at this level. The bike was perfect. I'm like, bubble's going to burst at some point. Burst for 2024. Maybe Barcia can use the time to his advantage. We have an off weekend. Is that going to make a difference for anyone, JT?
Surely. You know, a lot of riders will approach this differently. You know, Chase Sexton, I think, will take time off. He's going to be purely trying to heal that hand. He'll do a lot of off motorcycle training, I'm sure. Eli Tomac, these guys are going to be hard at work. But some of the other riders who are really kind of in the zone right now, really excelling, they may take a couple of days off and try to regroup. So it's going to be situational for every rider. You know, if you have some time to make up, you need to put the hammer down now. But if things are going really well, you may want to relax a little bit and let your body kind of use this time to recover. So it's not going to be the same week off for everybody. I just think you have to be very aware and assess the situation that individually you are in.
Okay, assess this situation for us. Track map of our upcoming round outside of Dallas there in Arlington. Take us through it.
Yeah, so Arlington is, you know, I think one of the favorite races on the schedule. The dirt's a lot better when you think about historically what, you know, when we were in Irving Stadium, it was dry, hard packed. This dirt is a lot better, a lot more traction. And I think a guy like Cooper Webb, that's why he's been able to do much better. You get some ruts, you get a lot more traction. The one thing I look at right there is the start. We have that similar start setup that we had at Detroit. So watch for that dynamic where people can push off the track and into the wall. You know, the whoops right now, it seems like we're in this 9 whoop scenario, and that's going to be the maximum. So maybe that helps Webb. If they break down a little bit, maybe he gets back to form and can use that to his advantage. But yeah, we're back in that football type scenario, which I think is a favorite amongst most of the riders.
And this year, Arlington will be our military appreciation race. I kind of like the idea of moving this around so different fans can see the looks in person. So we're going to do it in Texas this year. And the military appreciation, the teams, the gear companies, they really get behind this.
Yeah, it's awesome. You look at the creativity and everybody showing, you know, just honoring the military, whichever branch they may want to lean into. You see the Hondas there. Honda always does such a phenomenal job with this, but I just like to see what people are going to come up with, right? There's really no wrong way to do this, but people really step out and put their hearts into this. And I think everybody feels an affinity for this race in particular because, yeah, you know, the military services are such a touch point for a lot of people, and it's really difficult to not get behind this.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot to look forward to when we get to our next race after the off weekend in Texas. Okay, welcome to Fowler's Facts, and we welcome our staff statistician, Clinton Fowler. Going to talk all about Ken Roczen here in this edition. I suppose in hindsight, seeing Roczen win Glendale, he's had success at this place before, so maybe it looked obvious. But against this field to be this good, this was a really, really strong ride.
Yeah, you know, he's been phenomenal here at Glendale. He won in 2016. He won in the 2020 win. He swept the Triple Crown, the only time that's ever been done. So it shouldn't have been a surprise for us, but nonetheless, an incredible ride. The thing I want to start with, Weege, all-time status. He's now tied with Cooper Webb, 10th all-time in wins, 22. He's 9th all-time, tied with Jeff Ward with Supercross podiums, 66. He's 8th in Supercross points, just 2 points behind Jeff Ward. So you got to imagine he's going to pass him next weekend or in 2 weekends. So just incredible here. JT, I look at it, he's clearly all-time, top 10 all-time, but does he get the credit he deserves?
Well, I think not having that Monster Energy Supercross Championship is the real stat that everybody's going to point to for him not getting the credit he deserves. And I don't know if he's ever going to get it. It's the injury has to be pointed to in 2017. He looked like he was well on his way to winning many, at least one, if not many. So I think, history will look upon him fondly. You look at his status in the sport as a personality and how many wins and the dominant wins he's had. So to me, he is going to end up being like a Kevin Windham, a very fondly remembered superstar if he doesn't get that championship. But his stats are accumulating quickly here.
I think part of the reason it doesn't maybe reflect is because, man, he had his heart ripped out so many times by Cooper Webb, and that's not when people picture champion in their mind, it was not the way it worked out for Roczen. So I think that's kind of maybe tarnished how good he's actually been. And by the way, I find it hilarious that every time Webb or Roczen wins, they either tie or break a tie with each other. There's some sort of irony there. They've been so closely matched throughout their careers. But maybe, Clinton, it's not over. You're trying to make a case here that even for this year's title, maybe Roczen's better than we think, maybe more of a favorite than we think.
I think you've got to start to ask that question a little bit. This performance was absolutely dominating. I would argue the most dominant of the season so far through 6 rounds. Yes, Jett had a great ride at A1. Yes, he had a great ride in Detroit. But let's not forget, in Detroit, Roczen set the absolute fastest lap of that main event. Here in Glendale, he set the 8 of the 13 fastest laps. Almost half of his main event was faster than everybody else in the top 10. Just incredible. And we should have seen it coming throughout the day, because in his heat race, every one of his 8 laps was fastest in the top 15. So just incredible. He was faster than 35 of 40 riders every one of his laps. So just an incredible performance, JT. So when you look at Arlington coming up, what do you think is expected from him?
Well, I think he can win again. I really do. And the question will be, can he maintain this level of excellence through the months of March and April and early May? That's it. That is the only question that I think you have to ask about Ken Roczen, because it's been the question he hasn't been able to answer positively himself down the stretch. So for me, February, him winning a track like Arlington, no problem. Wouldn't shock me in the least bit. It's 6 or 8, 10 weeks from now. What does that look like?
Yeah, Clinton, this is interesting. You mentioned Jett Lawrence was great at Anaheim 1 and Detroit, but you could argue there's been just as many rounds here where Roczen has been the same level of dominance. You said this Glendale 1 was the most dominant performance by anyone all year. So let's look at these points and where Roczen could or should be right now.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is he could be holding the red plate right now, but 2 mistakes. Anaheim 1 crashes in the first turn, and maybe the more impactful and the most important one, leading the race in San Diego, and he makes an unforced error as Aaron Plessinger starts to catch him. Those 2 races combined to cost him 19 points. You give him back those 19 points, he is the red plate holder. Give him back just the San Diego race, and he's tied with Jett Lawrence, right? So the gap right now between 1st and 6th, where he sits, 15 points, the smallest in history, makes for some incredible competition here as we move forward. JT, I've got to imagine that he's a 2024 title contender. What do you think?
Sure, certainly could be. The San Diego one was shocking to me. We don't see him throw races away like that. Usually if you let him get out front and comfortable, it's going to be really hard to do much about that. But yeah, again, I come back to the same thing. Is this same Ken Roczen we're watching in Glendale, that level of excellence, can he show that when we go to Nashville, when we're late in the year, when his body is feeling the fatigue of flying around the country nonstop? Is he the same guy that he has been in January and February?
Oh, Clinton, you have really stirred up some data if you're a Ken Roczen fan. Most dominant night of the year at Glendale, could be in the points lead if you remove a few incidents here and there. You're telling these fans exactly what they want to hear.
It's a good season here. We've got parity. It's so close. Anybody could win this thing, I think, with a 15-point gap between the top 6.
Yes. Last thing, tell us how close 15 points actually is historically.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, guys. The average historically is 50 points between first and 6th place. Right now, that 15-point gap, the smallest in history. The second smallest is 25 points. So I think we're in unprecedented times. I think we're in for an interesting season, guys.
Wow. Okay. So the average is a 50-point gap. Right now we have a 15-point gap. This is awesome, no matter who you're a fan of. All right. Thanks for the data, Clinton.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's wrap up this episode of the show. As mentioned, a weekend off will resume at Arlington. I'll give you the exact times here. It's 1:30 Eastern. That will be Saturday for Race Day Live. And then a pre-race show will return with Katie Osborne at the host desk. That'll be at 6:30 Eastern. We'll be racing at 7 Eastern. And again, that's on Peacock, as always, and as always on the Super Motocross Video Pass. And speaking of passing, I love this part of the show. Let's get into the last chance, some highlights from our last chance qualifier from Glendale. First, a 250 class. Luck not on the side of the young rider from Denmark, Matty Jorgensen, JT.
Yeah, this is tough to be winning the race. And let's face it, he was in, right? He was main event bound and things out of his control. They have to go back to the starting line. And then he goes down and doesn't even get out of the first turn. This is just heartbreak. Young kid, he's going to have a lot more opportunity in front of him, but you had to feel for him in that moment.
Yeah, and then Cade Clayson 2 weeks in a row. Luck had been on Cade's side making these mains earlier in the year, but okay, huge crash over the finish line jump in Detroit. And then it looked like he was going to pass Justin Starling to get in Glendale, but no.
Yeah, going around the outside of anybody in the LCQ is asking for trouble in most scenarios. I don't think he expected Starling, who looked like he was on a one-way ticket to the rear, which he kind of executed the rest of that race. But for Clayson, this is just almost becoming a comedy of errors for him. You look at that crash in Detroit, and then this week, it's been a rough go for Cade Clayson over the last few weeks.
That's going to do it for this episode of SMX Insider. There is a weekend off from the races, but we will be back next week to preview the Arlington round. So that'll be next Thursday here, SMX Insider. But for now, enjoy your weekend off, everyone. We're the Jasons. We'll see you next week.